next lecture for Christian worldview in a global context. We're going to be talking about Buddhism today, and I really like this image. Um, the the Buddhist monk here on his laptop. This makes me happy. It's just a nice juxtaposition of what you expect of Buddhism versus what you may not expect. Buddhist monk here in a ruin, checking something on his MacBook. So I love this image. Buddhism, as we mentioned in our last lecture, is a response to Hinduism. It comes out of Hinduism. There are two other responses to Hinduism that we can mention here that are much smaller, but also still relevant. Jainism. Jainism is different from Buddhism in its response to Hinduism in that your soul, which in Jainism is called a jiva, are eternal and changing. This is contrary to Buddhism, where there is no soul, which we will see in a minute. Rejects Brahman as the ultimate reality and is likely a reaction to the caste system. There's also Sikhism. And Jainism, by the way, is symbolized by this hand, which I'm doing a horrible job of circling. That's the symbol for Jainism. The symbol for Sikhism is these swords. So if you dive into Sikhism, swords are actually really important in that religion. So that's one of the reasons why that's there. But occasionally, actually, I've even seen this symbol on the side of like an 18-wheeler on the interstate, which indicates, I would think, I guess, that the person driving is a Sikh. Anyway, founded around the 15th century CE. They follow a succession of gurus. They affirm Maya as the illusion and a form of this cycle of life, death, rebirth that we have in Hinduism and Buddhism. But they add a concept of a specific deity and grace from that deity. Sikhism is actually influenced not only by Hinduism but also by Islam, and it is also likely a reaction to the caste system. we're gonna see that as a thing. This is gonna be a trend. And then Buddhism. Guess what Buddhism is? Buddhism is a reaction to the caste system. So when we talked about the caste system in the last video, it's going to be super important for understanding what's going on here. So Siddhartha Gautama is the name of Buddha. So this is the original Buddha. Okay, so we have some conflicting dates regarding when he lived, but they're pretty close to one another, and these would be prior to Alexander the Great. Alex dies in 322. Okay, so they're going to be prior to Alexander the Great. Up here at the top, Siddhartha's birth, if we follow the older date, this is going to be closer to, in Israel's history, it's going to be closer to the Babylonian captivity, which is in 587. Okay. So that's just kind of give you some kind of historical points to attach to, right, in between the Babylonian captivity and Alexander the Great. So Siddhartha is born into a prominent and wealthy Kshatriya family. Remember the Kshatriyas in the caste system. His mother dreamt of a lotus-bearing elephant, signifying either a great ruler or a great religious leader. Okay, so great ruler, that fits with the Kshatriyas. A great religious leader, however, this would be the caste of the Brahmins, right? So right away, we have to understand that if she sees there's a 50-50 chance of him being a great ruler or great religious leader, she's going to panic, because one of those is his castely duty, and the other one, this is not his castely duty. This would be making him an outcast, right? Because he'd be doing the thing that he shouldn't do. So in response to the dream, she completely shelters him because she wants to make sure that she's in control of everything in his life, and she wants to avoid the religious leader potential. Right? She wants to try to keep him with the Kshatriyas so that she can make sure that he's a ruler. So he has something that's called the Four Sights. One day he leaves the house for a chariot ride, and this chariot ride, if you remember yesterday, the Ramayana, where Krishna and Arjuna are in a chariot ride, this is probably intended to call our minds back to that story in the Ramayana, where Krishna is telling Arjuna to do his castely duty, right? And so this is Buddha. He's not Buddha yet, but he's Siddhartha Gautama. He is in his chariot ride, um, going out to see these things, and it's kind of juxtaposed against Arjuna's experience. He sees old age, he sees sickness, and he sees death for the first time. And each time he asks his chariot driver, who, if we're following the connection here, would be Krishna, right? What am I seeing here? And this shakes him each time. He sees old age, he sees sickness, he sees death, and the chariot driver basically says this comes for all of us. All of us age, all of us eventually get sick, all of us eventually die. And this is something that Siddhartha's mom has kept from him, right? And so in keeping him from them, now he is shocked by this. And on his return, he sees a peaceful man in the midst of meditation. Now, this is probably sannyasi, right? We talked about these guys in the last lecture, right? This is somebody who's kind of given up everything in the attempt to get enlightenment, and they have renounced all things, right? He sees this person in the middle of meditation, and he sees that this person, knowing all of this stuff, seems to actually have peace, and so this leads to what is called the first renunciation. Shaves his head, he puts on a robe, and he leaves his family and his fortune behind, right? So he leaves all of this. Now, you have to think, in terms of the caste system, he's leaving the Kshatriyas. He's leaving all of this behind, and in putting on the robe, and in shaving his head, and the way that he's approaching his life, he's definitely tending towards this movement, right? This great religious leader. He is not moving towards being a great ruler. That's not his interest. That's not what he's heading towards. Okay. So he begins to study meditation with the Brahmins, which is a big no-no, right? This is outside of his caste system. And according to tradition, he lives on 1 grain of rice a day for 6 years. Now, whether or not that's true, but that's the tradition. This leads to an emaciated body and a cloudy, malnourished mind. He concludes that this has brought him no closer to enlightenment. And so this radical renunciation, basically living as a sannyasi, that this hasn't gotten him any closer to enlightenment. So this leads to the second renunciation. So, you have the first renunciation that makes you think there's probably a second one coming, and indeed there is. The second renunciation, he leaves the Brahmins and determines to find a new path. So he knows that sort of richness on one side and asceticism on the other side. He grew up being rich and not needing anything, and then because of his first renunciation, he gave up everything, right? And so he has nothing over here. So he knows what both of these feel like, right? And so he decides, well, this doesn't work. This also doesn't work. So this is what leads him to say there must be something in between these two. This is why Buddhism is often called the middle path or the middle way. Okay, he rejects both the opulence and the asceticism, and this is what gives us this middle way, this kind of splitting the difference, right? And this is going to be central to all of Buddhist philosophy, is this idea of balancing in between the two extremes. You shouldn't be too far in one direction or too far in the other direction. You should be halfway in between. You should be balanced in between on on everything, right? That's why it's the middle way, right? So this is foundational to Buddhism. So the middle way, beginning of this, is his determination to meditate under the Bodhi tree until he has found truth. It's not called the Bodhi tree at the time because Bodhi literally comes from the word for enlightenment, and so this is where Buddha gets his name. He's the enlightened one, and so the Bodhi tree takes its name from him rather than the other way around. And so he decides to meditate under the tree until he's found the truth. It's here that he realizes the Four Noble Truths and attains enlightenment. And so when he attains enlightenment, like I said, that's related to the word Bodhi, Buddhism, Buddha, all of that stuff. And the Four Noble Truths, we talked about those in an earlier lecture, right? He enters into dhyana, which is this idea of like a special meditative trance where you kind of have super knowledge and understand all things, that kind of thing. Stage one of dhyana is detachment from senses. Because remember, if we go back to Hinduism, what you see is a lie. What you see is a part of Maya. It's a part of the illusion. And so your senses are not helping you, right? You have to get rid of your senses. You have to ignore your senses. You have to kind of detach yourself from that. Stage two is completely focused mind. So instead of focusing on what you can see, feel, touch, taste, hear, you're focusing on the mental life entirely. You're focusing on what you can understand, what you can think about. Your body then is completely detached from the world, because again, the world is an illusion, right? So if you can detach from the world, then you're moving in the right direction, right? Your senses aren't helping. Your connection to the world isn't helping. So you gotta detach from that. And then stage four, you get freedom from dualisms. Dualisms, this is why Western logic is rejected, because one of the laws of logic in Western philosophy is, A does not equal not A, and so the idea is, I had a student explain this once by saying everything is either a potato or not a potato. And that's a good way to, it's the law of non-contradiction here. It's A does not equal not A. That's dualism. That's saying, we have A and we have not A. Those are two different things that we can distinguish from one another. One of the other laws of logic, law of the, what's it called? Excluded middle. Law of the excluded middle. Everything is either A or not A, right? So that's two or the three laws of logic. The other law of logic, law of identity, is that A is equal to itself. So being free from dualisms is saying that all of this whole idea, right, this is false. We don't actually have those distinctions. And remember, in Hinduism, Tattvanasi, you are that, thou art that. So if Western logic holds, if I say thou, A, art, not A, that doesn't work in Western logic. And so Buddhism wants to shed that, wants to get rid of that, wants to say, no, those things aren't true. There's no division, between you and somebody else, or something else even. And then stage 5 is super knowledge. And super knowledge is this, like, Buddhists will actually say that Jesus was an example of this. Right? When they encounter Christianity, they'll often say that Jesus was a Buddha. He was an enlightened one, because what you see him doing in the Gospels, when he knows the thought of someone's heart, that is an element of dhyana in Buddhism. Right, is that you just know everything. Everything makes sense to you. You see past all of the dualisms. You see past all of the sense perceptions, and you see the reality of everything. Okay, so that's what that stage 5 is. Excuse me. And this is where he gets the Four Noble Truths. Right, this is where he realizes the Four Noble Truths. Here's a picture of the Bodhi tree. It's back here, right? And so this is where he meditated until he attained enlightenment. So you can see people here kind of venerating this as a shrine. So the middle way, what we have to start with, and this is one of the super weird things about Buddhism, is there is no I, there is no individual. If you remember, in Hinduism, we had this idea of Atman. Remember, because Mahatma Gandhi is the great souled one. Atman is soul. Well, Buddhism believes Anatman, which is no soul. Okay, so you don't have a soul. You don't exist. You aren't real. In reality, we're all just the five aggregates. We're body, sensation, perception, mental life, and consciousness. But they're aggregates. They're things that kind of develop and kind of coalesce together. There's no central thing that's holding them together that continues through. That doesn't exist. You're not real. There are 12 causal links that perpetuate existence, and you're going to notice here that Buddhism is a big fan of numbers. We got the Four Noble Truths, we got the five aggregates, we got the 12 causal links. There's a lot of stuff. If those links are broken, then existence ceases, because the 12 causal links are what are maintaining these things. Okay, so when you go from one thing to the next in that 12 causal links, you can break those causal links. These things will go away. And since there's no I that's actually holding these things together, when these things go away, you cease to exist. And that's the goal. That's the goal of Buddhism. So these are the 12 links. This is again, I don't know Sanskrit, but I've heard Dr. Tennant say this before, and it's just fun to say. It's pratitya samutpada. It's dependent arising. It's like this arising, that arising. It's the way that he explains it. And so the 12 nidanas, these 12 causal links, this is what we have. Okay, and you have ignorance. You don't know things. That leads to karmic predisposition, which, remember, karma is a negative thing. So karma is going to be what you sort of accumulate over life. So you have a predisposition to attain those things, to kind of collect those things. Then consciousness emerges from that, and then you have name and form emerging from that. Then you have your six sense fields that emerge from your form. And then you start to contact, you start to feel, you start to desire. As a result of desiring, you start to be attached to things. Since you're attached to things, you act in the world. And then rebirth, aging, and dying are the end of that, which lead us back to ignorance, and then karmic predisposition, and yada, 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 right? So those are the 12 nidanas. Those are the cycle. And this is depicted in Buddhist artwork. This is Mara. Mara is this sort of demon deity. And the artwork here is depicting this cycle, right, that goes just all the way around. And we've got the nidanas out here, all 12 of them, right? And then the six senses are here, right? And so this is Buddhist artwork trying to depict kind of the perpetual cycle, right? The perpetual cycle of how all of this works. So if those links are broken, existence ceases. So what you want to do is you want to focus on the weak link, and the weak link is desire. That is the idea in Buddhism. The weak link is desire. And so this idea is refined, and this is the heart of the Four Noble Truths. Okay, so the Four Noble Truths: life is suffering, anguish, stress, and imperfection. And the reason that it is that is attachment, desire, or thirst cause that. In essence, if you didn't want things, you wouldn't suffer, which kind of makes sense, right? If I have zero expectations of life, if I have zero desires in life, then no circumstance in life is going to be able to actually impact my perspective or quality of life, right? Because there's no net gain or loss. I'm just always kind of evil or equal. uh, and so attachment, desire, thirst cause suffering. Attachment can be overcome, and the path, dharma, remember this in Hinduism, was teaching. In Buddhism, it's not teaching as much as it's like the way to live, the path of life. The path to achieve this, the middle way between extremes expressed in the Eightfold Path. Remember, we have a lot of numbers here, right? 12 nidanas, 6 sense perceptions, 4 noble truths. And now we have the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path is Buddhism. Like, it is like what Buddhism teaches, okay? So the Eightfold Path, we can group these into 3 kind of categories. And all of this stuff, you can kind of precede all of this stuff with right or correct or proper, something like that. That's the idea here, is that remember, it's balancing, right? So you've got something on one side, something on the other side. That's dualism. Dualisms are bad. We're going to do the middle path. We're going to do the balanced path. So you could say balanced here too, right? That's what we want to do, right? That's the Eightfold Path. The middle way is finding a way to reject the dualism and follow the balanced path in between. So in your moral life, you have correct speech, balanced speech, right speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration, and meditation. And then perspective and resolve and wisdom. So these are just to kind of group them conceptually. These aren't necessarily a part of it. It's just to try to help remember sort of what the 8 points specifically are. But these are the 8 points here. So speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration, perspective, and resolve. And so having an appropriate response to all of those, that you're not too far in one direction, you're not too far in the other direction. Because if you're too far towards having things, being rich, being comfortable, being, whatever, that's a problem. Buddha knows that's a problem, right? But if you're too far in asceticism, if you're too far in, trying to deny yourself, you're living on 1 grain of rice a day, that doesn't work either. Buddha knows that doesn't work either. And so everything that you do, when you speak, it has to be in the middle path. When you act, it has to be in the middle path. When you're one of your livelihood, it has to be in the middle path. Your effort, your mindfulness, all of it has to be balanced in between the extreme and the opposite extreme, because neither of those are going to work. Okay, that's the central core of Buddhism. That leads us to this really odd idea of killing the Buddha. Okay, this is a parable in Buddhism, and this actually may help you think through kind of what Buddhism is really going for here. It says, after years on his cushion, a monk has what he believes is a breakthrough, a glimpse of nirvana, the Buddha mind. The Buddha mind is dhyana, right? The big payoff. Reporting the experience to his master, however, he is informed that what has happened is par for the course, nothing special, maybe even damaging to his pursuit. And the master gives the student dismaying advice. If you meet the Buddha, kill him. The reason for this is the Buddha is the representation of his desire, right? He has what he believes is a breakthrough, and it's a breakthrough because he wants this, right? It's the big payoff. Well, if he wants that, then he still has desire. And if he still has desire, then he's nowhere near enlightenment. That's the idea. The Buddha that you meet is not the true Buddha, but an expression of your longing. And if this Buddha is not killed, he will only stand in your way. So this is how counterintuitive this philosophy is for us in the West. That like you should kill the thing you want so that you don't want. Right? That's the idea. Like you should get rid of all desire, and even the desire to get rid of desire is a desire. So you have to like become impassive, right? You have to become, like I said earlier, like equal, not evil, but like just balanced, and like nothing is going to bother you. That's the ultimate goal here in Buddhism. So some differences with Hinduism. Um, so Buddha could have attained nirvana and left the rest of us behind. He chooses to stay to help, and this is the foundation of Buddhist ethics. We briefly talked about with Hinduism. There's not a lot of ground for Hindu ethic because, in most cases, unless you're a sannyasi or a forest dweller, you deserve your hardship, and so I'm not going to help you because you need to work through that, and you need to get to the other side of it so that you can move through your process and get closer to enlightenment. But in Buddhist ethics, Buddha chooses to stay to help, and that is good. So if you have the opportunity to stay and help, you should do that. If you're offered enlightenment, the correct thing to do would be to reject it, to stay to help. Also, anyone can follow the Eightfold Path and work towards enlightenment. The specifics of this will divide Buddhists because they have different takes on why, or not why, but exactly how you're going to get there and that sort of thing. But so speaking of different perspectives within Buddhism, there's three primary ways. There's more than that, but for our purposes, there's three primary ways. There's Theravadan Buddhism, which literally means the way of the elders. This is older and stricter. And this talks about the three jewels. I take refuge in the Buddha, take refuge in the Dharma, the teaching, the way to go about. And then I take refuge in the Sangha. The Sangha is the Buddhist community. So I take refuge in the enlightened one, the teaching or the way of the enlightened one, and then the community of the enlightened one. In Theravadan Buddhism, enlightenment is only through many lifetimes, culminating in surrender to life as a Buddhist priest. So this is going to be one of the major differences between Theravadan Buddhism and the rest of the Buddhists that we see here. Sometimes this will get referred to as Hinayana. Remember, Maha means great. Hina means little. So this is literally the little vehicle. And this is kind of an insult, it's a pejorative towards Theravadins, that it's like, yeah, you follow Theravada Buddhists, you're a part of the little vehicle. You're a part of the small, and this is also because it's older and it's stricter. And older and stricter often tends to be smaller because people like newer things that aren't as strict, generally speaking. So Hinayana, not the way that you should refer to Theravadan Buddhism, but that is how it is referred to sometimes by people outside of Theravadan Buddhism. Speaking of people outside, we have Mahayana. Remember, we just said yana means vehicle, and we've already found out that Maha means great. And so this is the great vehicle. So you can tell Mahayana Buddhists are likely the ones that are going to call Theravadan Buddhists Hinayana. Right? They're Hinayana Buddhists. Mahayana, this is a reform movement within Buddhism. Basically says, how is a Buddhist priest different from a Brahmin? And so this says there is a second turning of the Dharma. That the Dharma, the Eightfold Path, they see this as a wheel, and there's 8 spokes on the wheel. Okay, so there's the Eightfold Path. And in Theravadan Buddhism, this turns once, and that's the Eightfold Path. Well, Mahayana says, yeah, but after that, the Buddha turned it a second time. And that second time gives us what we have in Mahayana Buddhism that you don't have in Theravadan Buddhism. And one of these teachings is the Bodhisattva. Bodhisattva is the Buddha stayed for our benefit, so also we can stay for the benefit of others. Thus, nirvana is available to everyone in this lifetime. You don't just have to become a Buddhist priest. Just calling out the name of a bodhisattva can help you move towards enlightenment. Just saying the name of a bodhisattva. And so this is where you get prayer wheels. This actually showed up in Doctor Strange, in the first Doctor Strange, when he's going to Kamartaj. There's a scene where he's kind of walking and just sort of spinning these wheels that have Sanskrit on them. Now, I don't know Sanskrit, so I can't vouch for this 100%. I'm pretty sure these are bodhisattva names, and spinning them, just by spinning them, you're moving yourself towards enlightenment. These are prayer wheels. Okay, there are actually people in areas where there's large Buddhist populations that will say bodhisattva names for you, so that you can move towards enlightenment. Like, that's actually like a job. The third way, Vajrayana. And this is the Thunderbolt vehicle, which that just sounds awesome. Right? Thunderbolt vehicle. If I've got to be in the great vehicle, the little vehicle, or the Thunderbolt vehicle, I know which one I'm going with, right? Thunderbolt. So this is the third turning of the Dharma, right? So what we said last time, there's the eight spokes, eightfold path, and Theravadins say it turns one time. The Mahayanans say that it turns a second time. The Vajrayanas say it turns a third time. So there's a third teaching of the Buddha. So this returns to the monastic emphasis of Theravadan Buddhism. This is where we start to get reincarnations of the Buddha. And so you see this sometimes in popular media where, somebody's given like three things in front of them, and which one of these things are you most drawn to, and if it's the thing that was owned by the previous incarnation, then that's like the sign that this person is the new incarnation. We see this in even in popular media with Avatar, right? Avatar: The Last Airbender. Avatar is he's the current incarnation of the Avatar, and that sort of thing. So anyway, that comes from these kinds of ideas, right? This resembles the Bon religion in Tibet in a lot of ways. We get mandalas, which are microcosms. If you look up mandalas, they're really like these super ornate pieces of artwork, and the idea is that like this detail is intended to like replicate the universe, and it helps you kind of like meditate through how do you understand the universe and that kind of thing. And ultimately, everything is Buddha. Everything, there is no you. Everything is Buddha. All of these would say there is no you. But in the other, Theravadan and Mahayana, the idea is to cease existing, basically. Whereas this, it would be more to become one with Buddha, which is similar more to the Hinduism. So that takes care of us for Buddhism. I know it's a really complex thing. That between that and Hinduism, they're tough. They're tough to understand. Timothy Tennant has some great courses that I'll link, free lectures you can get online that I'll link for you if you're interested in either of these. That you can download these lectures, and he'll go through in detail, go through both Hinduism and Buddhism. He also has one on Islam, and I'll link that one as well. But speaking of Islam, that'll be our next lecture up. So